Welcome to Defying the Odds podcast, the podcast where grit, resilience, and drive take center stage. I am Leonovsky, political refugee from the Soviet Union, and now professor of entrepreneurship.
I'm Victor Salcida, a formerly incarcerated individual turned software engineer and social entrepreneur on a mission to empower justice-impacted individuals through technology, education, and systemic change.
In 2018, I was fortunate to have Victor as one of my students while he was incarcerated. Fast forward, we're both free to find opportunities, challenge stereotypes as business partners, community leaders, and co-anchors of this life-changing podcast, where we dive deep into powerful conversations with guests who have shattered their own barriers and defied their own odds.
On each episode, we're here to bring you not just stories, but strategies, real tools to help you take on challenges in life, business, and beyond.
So tune in, be inspired, and get ready to defy your own odds.
This is Defying the Odds podcast, where no challenge is too great to conquer.
Let's go. Yo. We are back. What's up, Victor?
What's going on? We're in person.
We are in person. Look at this. Together. And we have our guest right with us. This is a special episode of Defying the Odds podcast. My name is Leonovsky.
I'm Victor Salcida.
And we're here to help you define your odds. Now, we have a special guest with us today, Nick Anderson. I'll introduce him in a second. But Victor, question. How have you been defying the odds since the last time we talked?
So what came to mind to me recently, how I defined the odds within this last week, was a trip up here to Washington from Texas. We had to defy the odds going into the airport. They're obviously having to get through TSA and have them sniff our baby's baby formula to make sure it's not cocaine. And then, getting through the whole ordeal of being on the plane with two kids, you had to defy odds.
You've never done that before, right?
No, this was the first time.
Oh my God,
time.
Right.
But we made it. We defied the odds, and we're here to tell the story. So,
I remember those times. I have two kids, much grown now, but I remember, man, when we were. I used to go to the airport, and there were these families with these people, with these kids, and all of this luggage, and I'm like, come on, like. How long does it take? Like, how much luggage do you really need? Like, there's like 15 bags for 3 people. And then I had my own children, right? And
now
you're
we're
like,
one of them.
Holy moly. And now I'm just like putting the bags on the conveyor belt. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a tip for you, by the way. When you travel with little kids, carry a bag of Ghirardelli chocolates, individually wrapped.
Okay.
Ghirardelli chocolates. If you want to be fancy, both milk and dark chocolate. What you do is, as soon as your kids start crying, you go around everywhere, the last two seats before in front and 2 seats after, and say, I'm so sorry about it. Do you like milk or dark chocolate? And you just give them the chocolates. No one can. They cheer for you.
Yeah.
They help you. They do want me to carry your baby. We had one woman, this beautiful matriarch. Our son was inconsolable. It's like, just give him to me. And she just brought him, and the kid is like, huh. And we're like, oh. So just let you know.
I'm going to have to try it for sure.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Anyways, so your turn.
Yeah. How about you, Leo? How have you defied the odds within this last week?
I think the thing that comes to mind immediately is the workout that you put me through on Saturday. God. So, we call Victor Roma in F3 jargon, and my nickname is Pure Lead, and this is overdraft, by the way. But so you got us going. You had this evil plan to meet up with Sprocket up in the in between 2 AOs. He didn't tell us anything, and so we started working around and then running up this hill. And I'm in the back. I'm just trying to survive. I'm just recovering. I'm just trying to get, and then, I'm still hurting. Today I was working out. I was like, push up. No.
You showed up though. That's all
I showed up.
And you made it. You're still alive.
I did. I still alive. That was beautiful. Anyways. All right. Well, guess what, guys? I'm so excited for this interview because Nick is not just a friend, he's a role model and maybe even a boss at some point. But Nick Anderson, as a way for introduction, Nick Anderson is the CEO of One Accord, and he brings 25 years of experience in banking and consulting, driving value for over 600 companies and organizations. He's also an author of a book called 6-Word Lessons for Middle Managers. Nick blends strategic leadership with deep commitment to spirituality. And from what I know, he's guided by the principles of faith, humility, persistence, and service, and empowers others to thrive in both business and life. Does that pretty much covers you?
It's an honor to hear that about myself.
Well, and I remember the first time I met you, we met on LinkedIn, and you were interested in the work that I'm doing in prisons, and I was interested in yours, and you're like, hey, let's go out for coffee. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. How about 6:30 a.m.? And you're like, 6:30, that's early. I'm like, no, it's not early. It's after the workout.
Yeah.
After the workout. And you showed up.
Yeah.
You showed up.
And that's where we met the first time.
Yeah,
I think you might have been leading that workout, or at least the next one I was at. And I understand how brutal that can be.
Yeah. Yeah, we have workouts.
Good, by the way.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, I've been on a health and fitness journey within this last year and lost about 80 pounds, feeling great.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Oh my God. Well, so Nick, we start every episode by asking our guest a simple question, and that is, how do you defying the odds? When I tell you defying the odds, what does that mean to you?
I mean, you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, and he would throw out there that there's a 1 in 4 trillion chance that I'm even born. So the fact that I don't know if those numbers are right, but those are odds. Here's what I think about life in general is that human beings, I say we really love the underdog. Like we'll always root for the underdog. Nobody liked Tom Brady when he was winning every Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Except for, there were some, but everybody could root for the other guy because they were the underdog. So like defying the odds, I think, is actually a part of how God made us to fight for justice, for righteousness, for goodness, for winning. Like it's written in an old book, if you're going to run to win. One of the earliest stories of heroism is a little boy taking out a giant with a couple of rocks. Right? Defying the odds has been a part of the human story since the beginning of time. So how do I define it? Defying the odds is living.
Even living is defying the odds.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Right. I love the underdog story. I think that resonates with me well, coming from my background and just having to grind from nothing. I didn't have a story. I didn't have any professional experience coming out from a 10-year prison sentence. And, here I was having to defy my own odds. And I knew there's so much stacked against me, but I think it's like a mental thing too, right? Like you have to get past those mental points of not letting your own self get in the way. Because we do let, these mental roadblocks become part of like what allows us to progress forward, because we believe it in our own heads, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get past this. Once you start believing that, then it's going to become real. So I think defying the odds is always overcoming some kind of challenge, whether it be professional or personal, but just stepping up to it without fear, without knowing what the end result is going to be, but just being willing and open to approach it.
Yeah, I like the edit where you said without fear. No, actually, without knowing what the end result is going to be. There's the notion that courage isn't the absence of fear, but instead courage is doing that thing in the presence of fear, not knowing what the outcome is going to be.
There's another piece to that equation. Yeah. So that's it is courage is the definition of courage is not versus bravery, is doing something with fear for something important enough to overcome it.
Right.
So the difference between cowardice and courage is the lack of that something.
The thing.
The why.
Yeah.
right? And it comes back like having started this podcast and starting to have guests from every walk of life.
Mhm.
One of the things that jumps out at me is that there is a definite theme that despite whether you talk to a CEO of a really successful company or somebody who have defied the odds from coming out of prison or someone who defied the odds by starting an F3 or anyone else, there are patterns. And that's one of the things that we're after. We're after to get these patterns, to get these things, they're not hacks because they require you to actually do the work, but they are they're arrows, they're directional arrows to point to the right place so we don't get locked in some place, you know.
Do you know what they are?
Yeah. No, I just recently posted an article, like the first 5 things that I've kind of observed.
The patterns that are
the
emerging.
patterns
What are you seeing?
Well, the number one pattern, the number one is that defying the odds is not about the end result at all. In fact, the process is way more important. And when people decide to defy their own odds, when I remember your story, when you decided that that's it, you were sitting in county jail, you're like, that's it, I am done. And from outside, there was no other reason. There was no way to know the before and after, but there was a definite change. There was the same thing with when we talked to Ginny. We talked the same thing that when we talked to Kyle. Like there were pieces, right? So at that moment when we make the decision, we don't know the outcome.
Yeah.
So the outcome doesn't matter to defying the odds.
So 2 things came to mind. Number one, do you know the guy? Do you know John File? So he started a program. He's done a number of things. He's defied the odds.
Okay.
In a lot
What's
of ways.
his name?
John File, Pfeil. I call him Johnny File.
Someone you know personally?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll be another guest on our podcast.
Yeah, he will. One of his things is called Love the Process.
Love the process.
It's a leader development. It's a personal self development, but it's all about that. Love the process. The second thing is this notion of outcome independence. We might get into some of my story, but I was a single guy late in life, and in the current paradigm of, let's say, dating, which, I mean, if you got a couple hours, we could hang out in that
For an episode.
But there was a notion of outcome independence relationally that I would say made the difference in success versus failure. And I would watch men also, single men in the dating scene, they're really looking for a wife, a life partner, right?
Right.
And they were outcome dependent. And it really just railroaded every potential relationship that they had, because they were so caught up in the need for the outcome rather than just meeting people and being yourself and so many things connected to that.
We'll come back to. I want to hear about from your story. Yeah, that's really powerful. So that's one of them. The other one that we got just recently is a beautiful nugget from one of our other guests who said defying the odds was for them is just saying no to the obstacle, to actually see the obstacle that prevents and saying no to it, and then just keep going. So the idea, I just posted I wrote an article about that, because that ing on defying the odds, right? Defy the odds is a motivational slogan. Defying the odds is a process.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what this podcast is about. It's about defying the odds.
When I was a young professional, and I mean that literally, I started my first real career when I was 17. I was a bank teller when I was 17.
Okay.
And that turned into a 25-year career. I would say in the early years of my career that obstacles are only visible when you take your eyes off the goal. That doesn't lend itself well to being outcome independent or not caring about it, because it was really goal oriented.
Right.
And what you just said, Leo, is interesting, that you see the obstacle but say no to it. Whereas the younger version of me would go into the world with a blind foolishness. I'm not going to pay attention to that. Nothing can stop me from the thing that I see that I want.
That's a different, right? And so you've changed a lot since then. You actually process oriented.
Well, thank
way
God
more.
I don't have like a 17-year-old boy anymore.
Yeah.
For sure.
The wisdom. So let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, I'm going to ask you for the story. Come up with share a story of how when you had to defy the odds.
Sure.
All right. And we're back. All right. So when we right before the break, we talked about the question of tell us an example of when you have defied the odds and any lessons that you have.
Yeah, there are several. Here's the thing. We have more in common than we do different. So there's a half a dozen stories I could tell, but here's the first one. Not
Let's
even
go.
the first, the earliest. There's a sequence here. So when I was 4, my dad left, but it was really my mom told him he had to go. So my father was both mentally ill and chemically dependent. My mom told him to leave. So I'm standing at the front porch, and I remember I can see the 13 steps up to where the car was parked, and Dad's leaving, and I'm standing next to Mom, and I'm trying to understand, why is he going? I don't understand. It was the first time I felt abandoned. Right? I'm 4. Try to make sense of that. So for the next 6 years, my dad was a weekend dad, and we had a good, loving relationship, albeit disconnected. When I'm 10 years old, he succumbed to his illness and afflictions and ended his life in suicide.
Oh.
So I'm 10 years old. It's the weekend. I'm waiting for my dad to pick me up from the Boys and Girls Club, and he just doesn't show up. And I got a call, and I got to get a ride from Grandma and Grandpa, and haven't heard from Dad all weekend. And his friend goes and checks on him, the next day or something, and we find out. So many things are connected into that. If I flash forward in my life, I'm going through boxes of stuff from grade school, and I find like a journal that I had written in, and this was in 6th grade. I was 10 years old, 6th grade. And I wrote in the journal, my friends all ask me how I can keep going or how I can, show up the way that I am. I don't know what words I used when I was 10. And I just knew that the answer to that question was, I don't have a choice. There's no other option but to go forward in my life.
It's a lot to take in at 10 years old, right?
Yeah. And, it can be a heavy story. There's heavier stories out
sure.
there. There's, that experience in my life both made me a statistic, but also put me in a position where I could have been another statistic, right? A different kind of statistic. And so how did I defy those odds? And here again, at 10 years old, I wrote in my journal, there's no other way. So that was, I think, the origin of what I had said earlier before our break. Like, obstacles are only visible when you take your eyes off the goal. Like I'm really, really clear about where I want to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I was, I think, even then. Matthew McConaughey says, who do you look up to the most? And he says, me in 10 years, right?
Right.
There's something about that I will put into one word, because we all like one word, so we can make sense of that, and it's vision. How did I defy the odds as a 10-year-old whose father killed himself? I had a vision for my life that was different, that was better than the experience that I was living. And it was so vivid that I could believe it.
Right. I love that. Vision is what we've seen from countless guests, as previously mentioned by Leo, is just like one of Andy. He had gone from one store to 5 stores, and he didn't have the vision necessarily to go from one store to 5 stores, but he had the ambition to continue on with his goals of, you know, just opening up store after store. So you can't really envision what it's going to look like 10 years from now, but you can set goals to get yourself there, right?
You can see the next one.
Right.
You don't know if it's going to be 5 necessarily.
Right.
You can see the next one. I mean, like if I get into the weeds, into the details of my life right now, it doesn't look anything like what I envision.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go bird's eye view, and you know, I've got an amazing, beautiful wife. You know her. I've got beautiful children. I live in a lovely, comfortable home. I own a business. I'm like the big boxes I can check. Now, how I got here, I didn't write the. I mean, it was a circuit. Like,
yeah.
You know,
So one of our guests, Dredd, the guy who started F3, he calls himself a collision learner. And I love that phrase, a collision learner, because there's no other learning. That is the most powerful learning. So the idea is you just want to create, his point is be a collision learner, go full force.
Yeah.
But have guardrails, build guardrails around the bends. And the guardrails are people, humans that will help you along the way. And they will say, hey, that's too far. What about there? And so help guide around. So I wanted to go back to this idea of vision. Mm-hmm. You said at 10, when you many years later looked and found your journal, you said there was no other option but to go on, and you had vision, right, for my life that was better than the one that I had. What was the vision then for you? And now, if you want to then fast forward, what is your vision now for your life? And so where you're at, and then any kind of thoughts and ideas that come out from that.
I like that.
What began to materialize right away was a fear of being a husband and a father. That's not the vision, but it was there. Going. And I would say at a young age, I'm not going to get married and I won't have kids, because I was afraid of being a failure like my father was. And I get to label him that way. So that was a fear. There was also this like desire to be successful. So my mother was an entrepreneur, and she was a single mom, like I said, until I was 11, and she remarried. So in that season of my life, we lived very modestly. She took care of us, but we lived very modestly. So I had this like vision of being successful. So my vision was that I would be a successful professional, like white collar, and single, right? Unmarried, no kids. I knew very young that I was not going to go to college. So that was a part of like the thing. And in kind of those early teenage years, I knew that independence was like, I almost contemplated like emancipation or like moving out on my own when I was 16, because that desire to be independent was so strong. Now, my mother is a wonderful, loving human being, so I didn't have to like run away from home. So I waited until I turned 18, but as soon as I did, I was out and kind of living into that vision.
So that was then.
That was then.
So that was what I hear you're saying is that the traumatic experience of your father, it has created a kind of a double kind of push and pull. In a way, you have the fear. You had the fear of like, hey, I don't want to be of commitment, and also of like being a bad dad and a bad husband, because you saw an example.
It wasn't a fear of commitment. It was a fear of being a failure as a man.
Failure as a man, as a husband and a father. So you but then you also wanted to be. You also had the drive to be successful,
super successful, and so that there's also a shadow side to that. Like I'm full on into shadow work. So at the age of 4, there goes my dad.
Right.
And I think, well, why doesn't he want to live with me anymore? What's wrong with me?
Right.
At
Yep,
the age
you
of
say
10, he ends his life. And I say, well, why wasn't I good enough for him to choose to stay alive?
Yeah.
It's an impossible question. There is
Right.
no answer to that.
No.
But I also knew that people would abandon me. Like I knew that people would leave me if I wasn't good enough. Now we can debate whether or not that's true, but
Right.
I knew it at 10.
Right.
So I had this, like we all have on some level, sorry to expose you guys, but every man in the world has this fear of not being man enough, not
Yep.
being smart enough, strong enough, smart
Right.
enough, make enough money, all this stuff, right? Well, I had all those fears just bubble up to the surface in that I had to be the best in order not to lose the people that I cared about the most.
Mm.
So that became how I made sense of success.
So your definition of success was transactional, because
I'm
if you're not good enough, and that is when I go to prisons
Mhm.
and I teach inside the prisons, the
Yeah.
first self-limiting belief, one of the biggest self-limiting belief, and I feel the
Mhm.
hairs in the back of my one of the self-limiting beliefs that that derails men who are inside.
Yeah.
Is this: they get trapped in a transactional engagement with humans.
Yeah.
They think that they must be a certain way in order for people to love them, or
Mhm.
their worth comes from what they believe in, or what they
Yeah.
do, not who they are.
Right.
And when they lose everything, then they don't have any worth.
Right.
Or if somebody threatens what they have, then they act out.
That's right.
Because now they have to protect who they are, which is not true. What we have inside, our worth comes from within, really, right?
Yeah.
That's what you've learned. You must have learned this somewhere along the way.
Sure. Yeah. So
right, but that's a different thing from what you were as a kid.
There's the origin of this vision that still lives.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Like still
yeah.
lives.
It's still there.
I'm
Shadow is there.
entirely performative at times, right?
Mhm.
Right.
I have to perform to earn the respect and admiration and affection and love of people in my life. Like
Mhm.
that is a part of my reality.
Right.
Now,
Mhm.
psychologists could debate me all day long. Brene Brown and I could go toe to toe on this. But it is a part of like how I'm wired right now.
Mhm.
There are layers on top of that have come from years of experience.
Mm.
Mhm. So talk about that. So now those are the values then, the desire to be independent, the idea is like, I got to earn respect of others, and I'm going to do it on my own. I don't need anybody else. Like, I'm just going to get that, right? That independence. Now, fast forward, you're here. You are CEO of One Accord. I happen to know you personally. I know how deeply, both spiritual and how deeply rooted you are in the concept of fairness and team play and engagement. So talk about what changed. So from that 10-year-old boy to now.
Well, okay, so the 21-year-old me, so call it 10 years later.
Okay.
I started my banking career, I said when I was 17, became a banker at 18. So I was a teller and then I was a banker. I was an assistant manager at the age of 19, was named assistant manager of the year that year when I was 19, became a branch manager when I was 21. So I'm like just climbing the ladder,
knocking out these milestones.
And I'm dating a girl, and we've been dating for, call it 4 months or something. And I said to her really casually, like, yeah, I'm not going to get married. I don't want to have kids, right? This is a part of the identity, the vision, still holding 10 years later. And she's like, well, I guess we're done then. And I was like, well, what do you mean? We're having a good time. Like, this is good. She goes, well, I'm not going to waste my time with a guy that doesn't want to get married. I was like, oh, shit. So I'm writing in my journal that night, which I didn't do very often, but that was a thing, and realized that like my heart had shifted. This vision of being a single guy with no kids, it almost evaporated in that moment. So we got married, and we started a family. And so then about 15 years later, this is now February of 2016, and career-wise, things have been going very, very well. I was a senior vice president in a bank. I had done numerous things in my career. She was no longer working. We had the house, the cars, the kids, the vacations. Like that was the life. And in just a totally unexpected occurrence, she was killed in a car accident, and my life changed again.
Wow.
So how many? So you in 2016,
Yeah.
you found the woman that you to spend your life with. You have how many kids?
2 kids.
2
And
kids.
the boys were 9 and 5 at the time.
9 and 5, and wow.
And she's
So-
gone.
And she's gone. So you lost your father when you were 10.
Yep.
Right.
And
2 major losses.
And you have now you lost
Yeah.
your children lost their mom.
So in that, the moment of that, and listen, I've talked about this a lot, so it's easier for me to talk through it sometimes than it is for people to hear it. But in the moment of that, I was agnostic at best, probably atheist. We could debate all day long about whether or not there's a creator. I'm holding her on my knees and praying to a God that I don't know, but I'm in a conversation that hasn't stopped since February 13 of 2016. So you ask the question, you talk about here I am today, and there's spirituality and there's these values. Half of the answer to your question, Leo, is I learned a lot through team sports. I learned a lot through formal leader development. I learned a lot through professional experience in valuing the people in my life and relational. I changed from that boy and the vision of being, never being married,
Single, yeah.
right? In a really kind of interesting irony, I did imagine getting married, but when I was like 40 to a woman that had kids. This was the young version of me. So that part of the vision came true, and it's a beautiful love story here that you know. But there's that spiritual element. Like, I'm praying to a God, like I say, that I don't know, that I had rejected, that I had denied. And that conversation has evolved into a relationship. And my spiritual journey, everybody's spiritual journey is worthy of its own book, right?
Right.
Love to hear spiritual journeys, and mine is no different than anyone else's, in that it's twists and it's turns and it's confusion and it's disappointment and it's heartbreak and it's all of these things. And with that, in Judaism there is a saying, I would butcher it in Hebrew, Mechalek lechem semayim is a very bad version of an argument for the sake of heaven. We've been in this for almost a decade, and it's awesome. It's awesome.
So what I hear you're saying is that from that moment on, you had this experience. You actually had to defy the odds in a very, very real sense. Becoming a single father, with a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. Like, my heart goes out to you. Both of us are parents of fathers of 2 kids as well. So it's not a stretch of any imagination to imagine that this can happen to any of us.
Yeah.
And here you are. One of the pieces that's different here is that in that moment you found this conversation with God.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that you credit with where you are now, or
100%. I mean, the only reason that I'm CEO of One Accord today is because I acted on what Christians or believers would refer to as the nudge of the Holy Spirit. I did something that was completely out of character for myself, just trusting that if I'm obedient to what I believe is something that God wants me to do, that even if I'm wrong, it's going to be okay. And that was to reach out to my now business partner with a question, almost a proposition. And here we are Here I am.
Yeah.
I mean, miracles.
Yeah.
For sure.
So how do you like maintain that vision going through all of these hardships? You think, especially at a young boy, 10 years old, having to go through that experience and then years later having to go through it. What advice do you have for listeners or somebody that may be going through, those types of experiences?
Advice. I don't know if I wouldn't feel comfortable using the word advice.
Okay.
But
message.
I will. Yeah. I mean, the question is like, what else are you going to do?
Right.
Like, seriously, what else are you going to do? Now that's me, the 10-year-old saying, I don't have any other choice.
Right.
That's me, the 35-year-old saying, like, my sons, like, I'm the only one left. Now listen, you just lost 80 pounds, 85 pounds.
Right.
Right. The day that I lost my wife, I would have stepped on a scale at 305. So I'm down 80, 75. There was this moment of like, I'm the only parent my kids have now. There's not two, there's just me.
Ooh.
I don't have a choice. I have to get healthy.
You have to figure it out.
So I want to stop you there. And I think both for our listeners, but even for us, this idea that I don't have a choice is, I hear what you're saying, but I know that that's like, if it's transcribed, of course you have a choice. You have so many choices. Mm-hmm. You had choices of giving up. You had absolutely had a choice of giving up. You had absolutely a choice of just going and finding someone immediately and marrying someone just for the convenience sake. You had a plethora of choices. But what I think you're saying is that you, because of your mindset or your belief system or what you hold important, the course of action was singular or hyper-focused on something.
So this is why I don't like to give advice or use the word advice, because I did make really bad choices. Like, I made a really, really bad relationship choice. You just said finding somebody immediately, and right? I did that. I was, lost, broken, whatever, confused. It was a bad choice. I own it, and it's entirely on me. It was never giving up, though.
Right. So that's the idea. And that's what I hear from you, and I hear from people that we talk to at their moments of inflection, is not giving up.
Yeah. And it
is a choice. That was a choice.
But it's so hard for me to say advice, because factually you're correct. I have lots of choices.
Yeah.
Experientially, for me, many of them are invalid. They're false positives. They're not real choices. When I approached the age that my father was when he ended his life, I stared into the abyss. And I mean that quite literally. I was on the island of Kauai. I was having what some might call an existential crisis.
How old were you?
I was 38. Here again, I think the same age that my father was when he ended his life. And I was alone. It was midnight, 1 a.m. I'm not sure. And I was wandering on the island of Kauai while my family was back at a condo. And I wandered myself up to the edge of a cliff in the dark abyss, and there are waves crashing down below. And I just said to myself, so this is what it's like for someone to contemplate suicide. Now, I was nowhere near contemplating suicide. But I said, so this is what it's like for someone to be, because I was one step away. There was a choice, but it was never a choice. It was never real. Jordan Peterson talks about a lot this notion of a man in particular needs to be a monster, because a monster under control is the true, like, actualization of gentleness. To be a rabbit that is non-threatening is not gentle. It's, you're a rabbit. You can't threaten. But if you're a bear and you're not threatening. So I'm butchering Jordan Peterson. He's way more brilliant than me. But to be able to look into the shadow of my own self, to look into the darkest parts of me and understand, what am I capable of? That's important to me.
Right.
So to be in that place where, to your question, Leo, there's lots of choices, but I just have to say, for me, they're not actually choices.
So just to get the quote right.
Yeah.
So Dr. Jordan Peterson's quote is, "You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it."
Right.
So this idea is actually a really wonderful, powerful lesson, that another pithy lesson here just from our conversation.
Yeah.
Because what I intuit from our conversation so far, that at the age of 4, you already had the drive.
Mm-hmm.
You already had that monster, so to speak. And then you were looking for, and we'll get to mentors in a second, but you were looking for a mentor.
Mm.
You were looking for a mentor in your father.
That's right.
And you did not get it. He failed as a mentor, as a role model. That would level set you in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so you did it on your own. You did it the best you could. And I'm sure that you've had mentors along the way to succeed. I know that for a fact, because that is one of the other truisms that we keep hearing. There are always these who've helped you along the way, and those who don't, is because they didn't have them. And then you've had several other twists and turns in your life, more specifically at 35 when your wife died, and at 38 when you were actually thinking about your father, going full circle.
Well, it's that, and Jordan Peterson will speak a lot on this notion, but it was something that I was afraid of from that time of, being 10 and being afraid that I would fail as a father, and is suicide hereditary? Am I going to be just like him? Am I, all of these? I had to stare into the mirror, or in my case, stare into the abyss, to prove that wasn't my story.
That wasn't.
Otherwise, I would always be afraid of it.
So one of the things that you facing that moment of facing one's own abyss and saying no to it, or saying like, yes, I see this as a choice, but I choose not to take it.
I like that.
That's why I took issue with I had no choice.
And we can arm wrestle over that. You're not going to change.
And I'm going to lose.
Well, it's fine. We
the
can
arm wrestle. The arm wrestle. I mean, look. I mean, I'm just saying. Yeah. I know my strengths and weaknesses. So, but this idea of having a monster and having it under control, I can relate to it, right?
Right.
Because when I came to the prison and I started teaching Defy Ventures program, CEO of New Life, and you were one of my students, we had 50 some students come in through the door. 80 were excited, put the applications in. 50 or 60 came through the door. 19 graduated.
Yeah.
Okay? And there were many reasons why people didn't graduate. That's not the point. The point is out of the 19 who graduated, there were men who had, using this Jordan Peterson's quote, who had a monster. Many of them had monsters in them, and so, but they are the ones who knew how to control it.
Yeah.
And there were men who gave up and who didn't have a monster to begin with, or gave up themselves and their monster, and they needed to be, as you like to say it, and we'll get to it, push, not they weren't pulling. So, but you came in, and the first moment, I remember the first time when they come in through the door to the visitation room, I always stood there and I shook everybody's hand, right? And the way people shake your hand, we can arm wrestle about that too. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. So the way Victor shook my hand, I knew that this guy, He was there for the right reasons, for the right time, and he was a monster. He still is a monster,
Yeah.
right? And he can control it. I love that concept. So one of the things, if you are listening to this, and your reflection is, where did I lose my monster along the way? Right? Because a lot of times we are forced, we one way or the other, we choose. At the end of the day, it's a choice, but we choose. But we are forced. We have that choice of giving something up, and we gave away a dream. We gave away something in order to succeed or survive, whatever the thing may be. And maybe your monster isn't there, but the idea is you can try to fix things around the corners. But the bottom line is you got to activate yourself. That hunger needs to be there, right?
I love that we're hanging out on this notion of choice. Okay, so I think that people who we might label as victims, right, that take on the victim mindset, will say, I didn't have a choice. I had to steal the thing, or I had to do the thing because I didn't have a choice.
Right.
Okay. And that puts them into victim. Now I'm taking the other stance and saying, like, I can't quit because I don't have a choice. That's a mindset thing, but choice is very important because it creates space for agency.
Mm-hmm.
So I will accept that we always have a choice because agency is important. And we have the personal responsibility to make the right choices. I choose to say I don't have a choice.
I think it's a mindset.
Unpack that one.
Yeah, I will. I mean, you were talking about monster. There is a real important piece of.
But the monster thing, I want to go here.
Yeah, keep on. Yeah.
So I've spent time in the company of some very bad men, like as the world would describe,
right.
Criminals, like violent, as have you.
Right.
And one of these men was a modestly successful UFC fighter. So somebody who could really hurt another man. And he said something so powerful to me. He said, I have an anger problem. That's clear. Okay. He said, but what I want from my family, for my life, is that when my wife and kids see me angry, it makes them feel safe.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, like, you got to say more. So because my anger will protect them. It will never come out on them. So, I mean, just imagine the safety that a boy, a small, like, helpless child, or a woman in the world, to know that the man that exists to protect them is capable of doing so, but would only turn that on something that would threaten them. So this is Peterson's argument, is that we have to be capable, but we can never direct it right in the wrong place. And then this actually transcends into business and other areas of life, where it's like the statement "nice guys finish last" is not untrue.
Right.
It's not untrue. But bad guys always get caught. Like, that's also true. So to be capable, but to have restraint, like that is the space that I am choosing to operate in, choosing to pursue.
So I love this idea of choice. And so I want to kind of zoom in right now on One Accord.
Mm-hmm.
So here you are, right? You've been a successful banker and you had a career in corporate world. You talk to us about when we come back. Well, let's take a break. And then when we come back, let's talk about One Accord and how you got here and what's your vision for it and where it's going. Okay.
Cool.
And we're back. So, Nick, let's talk about One Accord. Talk to us about what the company is as you're envisioning it, and then go on to talk about Defying the Odds with One Accord. What
Yeah.
are the 2 or 3 things that are in your way now that you see as going through and defying the odds?
So, first things first, One Accord has existed for 25 years.
Okay.
So in the context of business, that's defying, like that puts us in rare air, right? There's
For
not
sure.
many companies.
Especially
that
as a consulting company with the longevity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we've been doing what we currently do for, let's say, the last 20 years, kind of the first 5, and then there was a pivot.
Got it.
Along the way, we kind of branched out. I'd say got close to trying to be all things to all people, and recently have narrowed our focus. The Jim Collins Good to Great hedgehog, like let's just do what we do the very best. So today we are classified as a management consulting firm, but what we really are is a team of operators, so people who run businesses, and what we do is lead organizations through transition and growth, ultimately to maximize value. So we do this with a team of people who are strategists and consultants, people like you, Leo, that have the entrepreneurial depth and expertise that can guide owners and founders through these phases of growth. And we put people who have been CEOs or chief operating officers. We have a team of people that we would put into a company on an interim or fractional basis to do the thing. So we don't just write the X's and O's on the chalkboards. We bring in the quarterback to run the plays on the field while we're also writing the plays. So that's what we do today. The company was started by my partner, Jeff Rogers, like I said, 25 years ago. We've been through, the .com bubble, the global financial crisis.
Yep.
COVID, those, let's call those the big three,
right.
And at each turn, kind of stumbling through, what did you say? Collision learning.
I love it. Right.
We've got a friend, Chris Patterson, that says momentum creates clarity. When you're moving, so I'll stop there and see what other questions.
So tell me, so you have this team of operators and mavericks to help maximize the value of companies that are themselves are either going to be transitioning into being purchased, or they're trying to gain market share.
Well, let's talk about odds. Let's talk about odds.
Yeah,
okay,
let's talk about odds.
So I affectionately refer to every one of our clients as Bob. I just call him Bob.
Okay.
Sometimes it's Sally, sometimes it's Joan, but Bob. Okay. Bob started a company 40 years ago, and he's operated it. He's owned it. He's been very successful. He's made a lot of money, and he wants to sell the company because his kids don't want it. His grandkids aren't interested. There's nobody to give the business to, and he wants to sell this thing that he created.
Right.
He's going to defy the odds if he's actually successful in doing so. So the statistics look like this. Only 20% of owners who want to sell their company are able to do so on the timeline, at the price, and the terms that kind of they're looking for. And of those, only 5%, when surveyed, of owners who have sold their business, only 5% are completely satisfied with the outcome of the sale of their business.
So 5% of the 20.
5% of 20, which I believe is 2.5%.
Yeah, something like that.
So 97.5% of people who own companies today are not going to be able to sell the business that they've created on the timeline, at the price, with the terms that they want, and be completely satisfied after doing so. That's the problem that we endeavor to solve. Is defying those odds. Now, that's the core thing that we do, but we end up getting called by people who say, listen, I don't want to sell my company. I want to grow it. Can you help me? I can't sell my company because I'm losing money. I need turnaround help. Can you help me? I don't really want to sell the company, but I don't want to work in it every day. Can you help me? So we end up doing a lot of things, but the core thing that we do fits the theme of defying the odds, because statistically speaking, the odds of Bob being able to sell the business that he started 20 years ago and get out of it like its full value are very, very low. And all a person has to do is look up Cody Sanchez on any social media, and she is a former private equity person from Wall Street who is now advising the next generation to buy boring businesses from boomers.
Okay.
That's what she says. She's like, just, you can buy these businesses for cheap.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is optimize them, bring in some technology, do a little bit.
And this is one of the things, and that's what One Accord does.
We do it for the owner
before
they
sell. Exactly.
It's like this. You own a house, and maybe you could sell it for $100. Make up ridiculous numbers. You could sell your house for $100. But if you put a new roof on or remodeled the kitchen and did some landscaping, you could sell it for $150.
Right.
And maybe that costs you, $20 to do. Well, would you spend $20 to make 50? Of course you would.
Of course.
So now, looking at One Accord as a company, I had a pleasure of hearing you speak about it in the past. So, but for our listeners, what are the one or two things that you are seeing for One Accord as a company, the obstacles that you see that you and One Accord will need to overcome in the next year, or whatever your timeline is?
So I started with vision in our conversation. So my vision is that we have 100 operating principles working for us across the U.S. in 3 years. Today, we've got 20 operating principles in 3 states. So one of the obstacles is recruiting, bringing in the right people.
Got it.
Talented people, committed people who are values aligned, who contribute to the overall organization. Like that's a big challenge. Right alongside that, probably right out in front of it, is earning the business of the Bobs in the country. And so that's a bit of advertising, it's a bit of marketing, it's a bit of sales, it's trust building, it's delivering. We've worked with 650 organizations in 25 years. We have reels and reels of footage of success stories, but we're only as good as our most recent engagement. So we have to continue to deliver as we have been for 25 years and get that story out. And in an increasingly noisy, come on, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever we're getting our commercials these days, we're not getting them on Channel 4 and Channel 5 anymore.
Right.
Not at all.
It's noisy, it's crowded.
It's right. So what I hear you're saying is you have two major obstacles that you're trying to overcome as a company. One is recruiting right people. And the second is attracting the right business and the right people and getting in front of them to show them the skills that you already bring in, and then repeating the process.
It's a full-on chicken or the egg. Do I need the operating principles here to tell the clients that we've got the best talent? Or do I need the clients here to tell the operating principles that we've got the revenue? Well, I need both.
Right.
Well,
at the same time.
I think that going back to what you've already shown me, what I get out of seeing One Accord and what you do is that it's not a chicken or the egg. The beginning is starting with the why and getting the values right. And I think I want you to talk about the values of One Accord, because I think that what determines how you attract the right talent and how you actually bring in the right, because the right talent will also the right talent will bring in the business, right? It's not just right. So the idea is the right talent is the secret sauce, because they will bring the business. And if they don't, they're not the right talent.
Yeah. So when I first came into One Accord a year ago, I met with one of our senior guys. He's been here 18 years. And he said, well, what's your plan? I said, if I draw you a pie chart, half of it, 50%, is recruiting. 25% is marketing and 25% is sales.
Makes sense.
Because bringing in the right people is going to feed all these things. So values, you said, our tagline, if you go to our website, it says building value built on values. So building value for our clients, making their company more valuable, making their, allowing them to work less in the company. So their life, it provides more value. It means a lot of different things, but built on values. And those three, we have 3 core values and they've stayed the same. It's what attracted me into the company. I'm aligned with the company values. And it's truth, compassion, and service. Truth, compassion, and service.
Okay.
When we're talking to Bob, the owner of the company, the founder of the company, he has been told all kinds of things from all kinds of people. He just wants the truth from somebody who knows.
Right.
Like, Bob, listen, this thing in the company is broken. And if you don't fix it, you're never going to get to where you want to go. And here's how you fix it. Just wants the truth. Now, with compassion, listen, Bob, you've been putting decades of your life, blood, sweat, and tears into this. It's not like I'm not calling you stupid. I'm not telling you that you did something wrong. I'm just saying you got to fix this thing,
right,
because you've done so many other things really well. And I get it. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
But we're here to serve. So truth, compassion, service. We want to come in and do this thing that you haven't had the time, the energy, the experience to do. And we're going to do this from a place of service. So truth, compassion, and service, those are the values that we operate on. And we lead with that.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, values I think are really important to help guide how we move forward, and I love that it's been able to stay that strong of a presence over the years, and you guys are able to live by it. I think that's really powerful.
We had with our team, our leadership team, we had this discussion this year about, are these still our values? Like, is this still true? And we wrestled with the notion of adding a 4th value. Something I value personally, as I've shared, winning. I didn't say that in particular, but that vision and, wanting to be successful, right? Like I always want to win. I want to win for our clients. I want to win for us. I want, and the team gets excited about winning. Like, we like to win. So should that be one of our core values? Notice I didn't put it on the list.
Right.
We really debated this. So is winning a part of our culture? Yeah, it is. Is it something that we value above or equally with truth, equally with compassion, equally with service? We're not there yet. Maybe in a couple of years, but we take values very, very seriously. It's not just words on a wall.
Right.
Well, and that's I think that I would say that if you actually practice the values that you have outlined, truth, compassion, and service, winning comes out of them. Winning is not a value. Winning is an outcome of following your values.
That's a good call out.
All right, take that on. Yeah, winning. I think winning is not a value, and there's so many people get caught in that. They are goal oriented to that point where it becomes a value, but it's not. It has no value. It is truly an outcome of following your values.
This is the exact debate that we had.
Yeah,
and I mean, there was, if you
awesome.
can imagine, 9 of the really accomplished winners at the table, and we're having this debate, and it was rich and it was good, and I loved it. And ultimately it didn't make the cut.
So let's finish up by talking about kind of like thinking about going full circle. Defying the odds is a process, right? It's not an outcome, it's a process. So in this conversation, you've shared with us some really amazing stories, some of them incredibly heart-wrenching, about the loss of your wife and loss of your father. And then you talk to us about your vision for your company and how you're going to do it and how values kind of come through all of it. What one message, if there was one, can you share? Let's leave with that in terms of defying the odds for yourself, just as a self-reflection.
Yeah, you're going to love this. I would just say that that vision is going to come true because I don't have a choice. But listen, but here's the it's the mindset, like
It
you said,
is,
Victor.
yeah.
It's I'm going to approach every day as though I don't have a choice but to commit to fulfillment of this vision.
So
And-
so it's the mindset.
It's the mindset.
It's the mindset. So going back,
Yeah.
you were asking, like, what are you learning? What are you learning?
Yeah.
It's the mindset.
It is.
It's the mindset. Whether you are stuck in prison, serving 10-year sentence, right?
Right.
Or a life in prison, or whether you are you are holding your loved one, right? Like,
I mean,
it's
I followed a lot of thought leaders, gurus, Simon Sinek, Tony Robbins, Alex Hormozy. Like, Hormozy's probably better than any of the rest of them right now. I can say mindset. We can say mindset. And to
Right.
the guy or gal that's listening, it's like, okay, I've heard that so many times. So what does that mean?
mm-hmm.
The mindset is like picking up the remote and turning off the TV, turning off Netflix. The mindset is when I don't feel like getting out of bed and the alarm's going off at 5:30, it's grabbing the covers and throwing them off my body so that I feel cold and I get my ass out of bed. Mindset is when I'm tired and I'm exhausted and my kids want something from me, that I take a breath in and breathe it out and I show up for my kids.
Love that.
The mindset is this, like, I don't know, squishy word, but the actions. It's the, like, Nike nailed it years ago. Just do it, right? It's the, I'm not going to put something off for tomorrow that I could do today. The mindset is I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to feel hungry because that's what it takes to lose 85 pounds.
That's really awesome.
Choose that.
So the mindset ultimately connects to actions of showing up, of sacrifice, of being uncomfortable,
That's
and of not knowing the end result, and just keep going. So it's a pattern. Thank you so much. I mean, this has been such an awesome conversation, and we can arm wrestle later. But to all of you who've been listening, I hope you are getting a lot out of this as well. Victor, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with the mindset part of it. That's why when you guys were going back and forth, I'm like, I'm kind of leaning more towards Nick on this, but I do think that you have to have like that and that vision that he talked about as well. He had that role model, his father, that he didn't necessarily look up to, but it was a vision for him to kind of guide him forward, and affect how his outcomes were. Those were life-defining moments, and it's really how he dealt with them. He could have easily said, no, I don't want to deal with it, or no, I'm not good enough, but he had the mindset to overcome that, and I think that's what really, really set him forward.
Yeah. No, I love it. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
Brother. And
so
I love the idea and the opportunity for Victor and I to be in the same room together. It's a huge thing. It's thinking about, again, that time where we first met, right? And the difference that 8 years make.
For sure.
It's incredible. But that vision, your vision never changed. Your vision, you had no choice.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. You guys have an awesome rest of your week, and we'll see you next week.
Keep defying the odds.
Let's go.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Defying the Odds.
We hope you found inspiration, insight, and maybe a new way of looking at the challenges in your own life.
Remember, defying the odds is a mindset, and you have what it takes to overcome anything.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe.
Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay resilient, and never stop defying the odds.